We got a patent on stopping panic attacks using our program. Because what I say is a panic attack is a combination of psychological and physical. And most of it starts psychological. So the mind is worried about something, but you're not aware of it. So it's on a very low level. But what happens is it starts changing the oxygen CO2 levels when it starts to adjust. Then a message goes to the brain saying, we're running low on oxygen. So then it starts to speed up the heart, speed up the lungs, and then it's changing the pH of the blood. So all of these signals keep coming to the brain, but you don't know it. So what I wrote in the patent is that a panic attack starts up to an hour before, but you're just not aware of it. So by the time the panic attack hits, it feels like it came out of nowhere.
Welcome to the Brain Regen Lab podcast, where ancient healing meets modern science to transform the future of brain health. I'm Dr. Greg Eckel, and after 25 years in the trenches of integrative medicine, I'm here to challenge the status quo. On this show, we dive deep into the most advanced strategies in brain regeneration, cognitive longevity, and bioenergetics with some of the brightest minds in neuroscience, medicine, and performance. Whether you're fighting cognitive decline, optimizing your mental edge, or just curious about what's possible for the human brain and being, this podcast is your lab for discovery, healing, and human potential. So let's push the boundaries of what's possible, revitalize your mind, transform your life. Let's begin. Welcome back, everybody. Dr. Greg Eckel here. The title of our discussion today, Higher Performance Living, Reboot Yourself with Dr. Wood. Don Wood, PhD, author, speaker, and founder and CEO of the Inspired Performance Institute, creator of the patented TIPP method, focused on helping people resolve their trauma and get their lives to a place of high performance. He's helped thousands of people live a better life and overcome the effects of stress, anxiety, depression, trauma, and addiction with his neuroscience-backed program, TIPP, the Inspired Performance Program. TIPP program is designed to clear away the effects of disturbing or traumatic events, repurpose old thinking patterns, and set the individual's mind up for peak performance. Dr. Wood is also author of 2 books, Emotional Concussions and You Must Be Out of Your Mind, and is releasing his newest book, Don't Mess With My DNA, in the near future. Dr. Wood, welcome aboard.
So nice to be with you, Dr. Eckel. I was looking forward to this. I think we got so much in common that we can talk about.
I agree. And as I mentioned before we got on the air, your name comes up on some very large stages on the magnificent work that you do. Your reputation precedes you. I was really excited. I still am for this conversation and many to come. You know, this is such an issue of our time. I guess it's been with us forever, but you know, when we talk about performance and trauma, the elephant in the room is finally getting its due day. And there's a lot of misunderstandings about it. So, you know, let's talk about, you know, big T trauma, little t trauma. What are we? Because a lot of people don't identify with either the big T or the little t. And, you know, what are you seeing in your practice? And TIPP, where did that come from? We got all kinds of things to go here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. That's why I called one of the books Emotional Concussions. That's the small T traumas that people don't sometimes even recognize. It's
Mm.
the coach that told you you're never going to make it, or the teacher that called you stupid, maybe a parent that was sort of overly critical of you as you're growing up. Those things add up. And those emotional concussions, right, can then show up in behaviors later on in life where you just maybe overcompensate or you blame other people when things go wrong because you were constantly criticized. So, and then the obvious big T traumas, you know, are things like I've worked with Boston Marathon bombing survivors, the Vegas shooting victims, some of veterans from war. Those are obvious. Those people come in and they know exactly what they're looking at. But what's really interesting is I had one of the Boston Marathon survivors come in, and what she said afterwards, she says, I thought I was coming here because of what happened to me at the marathon. She says, but actually what you did for me for my childhood trauma was even more powerful. I didn't realize how much that was affecting me. And
Wow.
so a lot of times people are high performers and it doesn't show up. I mean, we both work with a lot of highly successful people who will say, oh, I'm pretty sure I'm good. That trauma, I've worked through that. I'm
Yeah.
not having an issue. I just had a couple, I mean, they literally are billionaires, husband and wife, and said they've done all of this different things. They think they're fine. And then when we start getting into it, they didn't realize how this trauma was still there.
Are there some telltale signs or, it is that component. It's so unconscious, subconscious that those programs are running the show today. But then, you have a power couple that comes through, have done tons of personal growth and self exploration and maybe shadow work, all of those things, thinking like, we've got our bases covered. And then they come in and are like, whoa, there's still a lot here. How can that be? Are there patterns that people like? How do you know?
That's a great question because a lot of people will say, they're operating really well. And this couple obviously are. So you can operate at a very high level.
Yeah.
But the thing that I do, which is a really simple test, is I'll say to them, can you think about an event at some point in your life and tell me about it? And as they tell me, if they start to get emotional, then it's still active. Because what I say is anytime you have an emotion, a feeling, or a sensation, your mind is calling for an action. The purpose of fear is to escape a threat. The purpose of anger is to attack a threat. So if you start talking about something that happened to you 10 years ago and you're still feeling fear or anger, I call it a glitch. It's an
Mm.
error message. Your subconscious is looking at that information in real time and it's calling you into an action, but the action's not possible. And so people say, well, I've learned to manage that and cope with that. And I'm like, why would you want to manage it? Don't
Yeah.
you want to just fix it? And
Yeah.
that's what we do.
Awesome. So you're able to clear those things where they're not triggering, they're not charged, they're not influencing on an unconscious, subconscious level any patterns today.
Exactly. So, for example, I'll give you some examples. I had a U.S. Army sniper. This was the most dramatic one. He had to shoot and kill a 12-year-old boy.
Mm.
Now, he knew he had the problem. It wasn't a question. And so when he sat down with me, he said, I can't talk about this anymore. They keep asking me to talk about it in therapy. And he says, I got arrested at the VA last week because I started picking up tables and chairs and throwing them.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, the good news is I'm not going to ask you to talk about it. He said, well, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to fix it. And I don't have to talk about it. I says, no, you don't have to talk about it. So he says, okay. So by the time I was finished, he could give me a complete description of what happened without shaking and crying. And he said, how the bleep did you do this? How am I able to talk about it now without shaking and crying? And I said, because for 8 years, your mind's been trying to get you not to shoot. The emotion is coming because your mind is trying to get you to make something stop. Don't shoot is what his mind was trying to get done. But he
Mm.
couldn't not shoot. So his mind kept calling for the action and it was impossible. So
Wow.
that's what I talk about. And so that's what I discovered in all the research is the mistake that we're missing in traditional therapy is we know it's a memory, but we think we have to manage it and live with it. And I'm just saying, no, we don't have to get rid of the information. We just have to take the intensity out of it. So the program that I do is it takes it out of what I call high definition into a low definition file. And the way I explain it, like if I asked you, what did you eat for dinner last night? Can you tell me what you ate for dinner?
Yeah, I had lamb shank.
Perfect. So when I asked you that, you saw pictures, right, of what you ate, maybe where you were eating it, right?
Yeah.
And you
Yep.
looked up,
Yeah.
right? So you'll see on the video, right, that you looked up. So you saw the pictures. That's how you stored the information about dinner. Now, last night wasn't threatening or disturbing, so it's stored as a fairly low resolution file.
Mm.
But if you were in a traumatic event, all your senses are heightened, sight, smell, hearing. So how's it going to record it? High
Mhm.
definition. Then when your mind recalls that memory in high definition, it sees it in real time as if it's happening now. That's the
Yeah.
glitch.
Yeah. So just like it happened today, it happened tomorrow, every day that energy is glitched onto that memory.
Yep. And then something looks like, sounds like, smells like that. Your mind does research, goes in, how do we handle this? So say it's a smell or a sound. Your mind will say, what do I know about that sound? And then it goes in and literally does a Google search from memory and starts pulling up data from that event and starts reviewing it in real time, and then activates your nervous system and puts you into a fight or flight state.
Wow. And so how long have you been in development to get to this systematized neuroscientific process that you've got?
I started in 2009 because of my daughter. My daughter had diagnosed with Crohn's. And so they told us there's no cure for Crohn's. We don't know what causes Crohn's. So I started doing a lot of research. So between 2009 and 13, I was researching. Then during that time, we found out that she had trauma that she never disclosed to us. And so the trauma was creating the Crohn's,
Mm.
because I'm just publishing this study right now. My theory is that unresolved trauma creates inflammation.
Mhm.
Inflammation, then that compromises the immune system. So the genes that regulate inflammation upregulate, the genes that regulate the immune system downregulate. It's supposed to be a temporary pause to address the threat, right? We need to have the inflammation to protect us, the immune system, we don't need to do maintenance, we need to be focused on survival. The problem is that trauma keeps running. So it stays in that state. So now you've got the person in the perfect situation to get sick because they got weakened immune system and high inflammation. And so what I've done now in the study is proven that we're taking people through the program and we're bringing inflammation down and bringing immune system up. And we're
Mm.
publishing it right now.
Interesting. So were you doing like microbiome testing with that or just looking at the interleukins in their
Yep.
blood work?
So we're doing the blood work, and then we'd see the IL-6 would be elevated, and then the immune system, the genes that regulate the immune system are lower. And so
Wow.
what we did is we did a pre-test before the session and then a post-test after the session, and we're seeing upwards of 50% reduction in inflammation and 100% increase in immune system response. Also, neuroplasticity is increasing by up to almost 45%.
That's a great study and great work. And that is a component that underlies a lot of what we do here at Energy for Life Centers with chronic neurodegeneration. And the same, I've seen this underlying trauma. Now, there are a lot of folks that don't identify as having trauma. So that's why I started out asking you, like, well, how are there some telltale signs for somebody to say, maybe I have some unresolved trauma? And you talked about the emotional concussions. And then what's this concept of atmospheric conditions? Is that the capital T trauma, the bigger trauma, or?
Yeah, like what I talk about is what are your atmospheric conditions? And so for my wife, she grew up in a very violent home with a very angry father, a lot of abuse. And so her atmospheric conditions were very dark and stormy.
Mm.
So she uses, not consciously, but subconsciously, her mind uses those experiences to protect her. So I never understood it in the beginning because when I first met her, I mean, she's amazing. I loved her. But if I said something like, no, I don't like that, she would tear up and start to cry. And she would say, why are you mad at me? And I would
Mm.
go, why do you think I'm mad at you? And she'd go, well, the way you said it, you're getting mad. I said, no, I'm really not getting mad at all. But she wasn't wrong and I wasn't wrong. But if I had a little tension change in my voice because I was tired, she
Mhm.
heard that like I was yelling. And then
Mhm.
that would activate her nervous system because her mind would then start to say, what do I know about men when I start to hear that change in their voice? And all this flood of data from her father would come in. That was what was making her cry. I thought it was me. I
Yeah.
was thinking, well, I got to change the way I say things. I got to be more careful. I got to choose my words better. But
Yeah.
it would take very little to activate it.
Wow. I think when we know about the ACE scores, the adverse childhood experiences in North America, we know no one gets out of here alive, right? There's trauma that happens just by being born and living. And so, who would this not benefit? Have you seen it not work for somebody, or somebody just comes through and says, what's Dr. Wood talking about?
Very little, because most people can find something. For
Yeah.
example, I had one lady, and I was doing actually a group, and I asked for a volunteer to come up, and I was going to take them through, an exercise. So she comes up there, but then she says to me, well, I don't have trauma. And I said, so I'm thinking to myself, why did you volunteer? But anyway, I said, okay, this is actually, it was really worked out really well. So I said, so can you think about a time in your life where you maybe had, an ACE or an adverse childhood experience or an emotional concussion? So she thought about it. She says, okay, yeah, I've got one. She says, when I was 6 years old, I was in church with my family. And she says, and I was talking. And then I can see her eyes filling up. And she says, and my grandmother took out her hairbrush and hit me on the head and said, stop talking, you're in church. And then the waterworks are coming. It took her like 30 seconds to catch her breath. And this is what she said when she caught her breath. I lost my voice that day.
Wow.
She says, I never stand up for myself. I let people push me around. She had never connected. She never really realized it until all of a sudden it was like, yeah, that's when I really stopped standing up for myself. Now, and what I talk about is with the best of intentions, right? Children don't have enough life experience to understand what that means. Her grandmother certainly wasn't trying. It wasn't that she was being mean to her or bad. She was just trying to get her to stop talking. But she heard, they don't want to hear from me. And she's an authority figure. So those kinds of things, that's the emotional concussions that I'm talking about that can happen. And then it showed up, but she didn't know it. Not until the key to the program is I use a 4-hour session because by the time we're 2 hours in, the mind's in optimal condition to start resetting. It's very relaxed and focused. It's purposeful, the process that I use. And that's how that kind of a thing will pop up.
Wow. And that's a process you do in person, but you also have it online as well for people.
We do an online program and it works really well. In fact, today we were just on the Today Show in New York, and one of the reporters actually went through the program and she said, I dealt with anxiety for years. And she says, and somebody recommended me to do the program. And she says, and it's gone. She says, I spent years in therapy and now the anxiety is gone because the anxiety was being created by the trauma.
Wow. Great lead in. What is anxiety? What is that?
This is interesting. When people come in and say, I have anxiety, depression, or whatever, I say, that's just a symptom. It's not what you have. It's a symptom of something. So I was speaking at an event a couple of weeks ago, and I said, think of anxiety as an email. So this email keeps coming into your inbox, right? And you look at it, but you don't open it up. So you just keep deleting it, it comes in again. It's the message in the email that you need to understand. That email may be from your bank telling you that it noticed suspicious activity on your account and it's trying to get you to check it out and make sure it's not a threat. But if you keep ignoring it, the anxiety is going to stay. So the idea is, what is the anxiety calling for? It's an action call. It wants you to be aware of something or be prepared for something. So most people just ignore it or they medicate themselves and they numb it, which is literally ignoring the message.
Wow. So, and that, I mean, it's really uncanny. I mean, I have kids in their, early 20s, and it seems, we've seen post-pandemic anxiety levels going through the roof. And that aspect of one, they're saying they have. So I love that you're, have the distinction of, no, that's a symptom. You don't have it. It's a symptom of
Right.
what's going on with your body. And then two, it's almost like they wear it as a badge of honor. Like, oh, I have that too. And, it's like we all have anxiety. I'm like, well, what does that mean to you guys? And, when that goes unchecked, it can lead into a panic attack, which can feel like you're having a heart attack, right? And significant symptoms. And perhaps a lot of our listeners and viewers may experience something on that continuum too. So is it possible to stop panic attacks? Hey, it's Dr. Eckel here, just taking a quick moment to say thanks for tuning in to the Brain Regen Lab podcast. If you're enjoying this conversation and want to stay ahead of the latest in brain health, biohacking, and longevity, make sure to subscribe at brainregen.com/podcast. Not only will you never miss an episode, but you'll also get exclusive insights and tools to help you optimize your mind and body. I appreciate you being on this journey with me. Now, let's dive back in and keep unlocking the full potential of your brain and body.
I actually have a patent on it. We got a patent on stopping panic attacks using our program.
Oh.
Because what I say is a panic attack is a combination of psychological and physical. And most of it starts psychological. So the mind is worried about something, but you're not aware of it. So it's on a very low level. So you're not aware that your mind, it's almost like there's a lion somewhere in the house. I don't know where the lion is, but I'm going to be on guard. So you're physiologically, the mind starts to prepare you to just in case there is a lion, but you don't feel it yet. It's below your conscious awareness. But what happens is it starts changing the oxygen CO2 levels when it starts to adjust. Then a message goes to the brain saying, we're running low on oxygen. The brain interprets that as more evidence that there must be a threat, but it can't find the lion yet. So then it starts to speed up the heart, speed up the lungs, and then it's changing the pH of the blood. So all of these signals keep coming to the brain, but you don't know it. So what I wrote in the patent is that a panic attack starts up to an hour before, but you're just not aware of it. So by the time the panic attack hits, it feels like it came out of nowhere, but it didn't. So what I did in the patent is we developed a device that will detect the physiological changes. And then what we've taught you in the program is to shut down the loop, the double loop. And so then you never experience it.
Oh, that's phenomenal. So is that something that comes with the program or that's additional, the device?
The device is additional. We're working on a new device because the one that we've got, we're still having some little issues, but that's how we actually got the patent. Because at first, the patent office said, well, you're just monitoring vitals, aren't you? And we said, well, no, we're monitoring vitals, but that's not the purpose of it. It's to then alert you that you don't know that your mind is now looking for danger and it's starting a process going. And I found a study out of SMU University that I added into the patent. They had 2,000 hours of data on panic attacks. And they said they had 13 people experience a panic attack during the study. All 13 people said the panic attack came on instantly, but they were monitoring them and showed that it was starting up to 40, 45 minutes before they were aware of it.
Wow.
So as soon as we put that into the patent, it verified that we were accurate, that this is a double loop, psychological, physical. And it can come from physical too. So it could start physical and then turn to psychological, then psychological pushes the physical again, and then they just keep pushing each other.
Yeah. So then you get into that, the chicken or the egg, was it physical or was it emotional or physiologic?
We don't need to know. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't
So we're
matter.
getting people out of panic attacks, even without the device, because once we teach them how to do it,
Yeah.
but the device is almost like security. They know that if they're going to get notice of one before they get it. So our clinical director had 30 years of panic attacks. And ever since going through the program, he's never had one again.
Wow. 30 years of panic attacks and going through the once 4-hour program.
And
Yeah.
he hasn't had it.
Wow. I mean, that's a game changer for so many. So congrats on getting the word out on nationally televised morning show, and why I wanted to have you on too, again, because of the stages that I would hear this illustrious Dr. Don Wood help with this and that. And I'm like, wow, and then finally get to meet you through a mutual friend. It's such potent work on, it really piggybacks into what we're doing here and what many others are doing right now. I feel like we came for this moment in time because there is some madness out there, and being able to really have control of our apparatus, our physiology, our emotions, having that awareness and the consciousness around it really can create some deep peace for people.
And that's what we're all looking for. So the key is what interferes with that. And like I said, I learned that because I had an idyllic childhood. I didn't really have any trauma, like literally none. And so I knew what at least the model was. So I got bumped here and there by a friend, a teacher, a coach, but I had parents that literally never argued, never fought, never raised their voice, never hit us, never once. So I had this situation where my nervous system stayed regulated. And when I came back home, that's what I wrote the book, Don't Mess With My DNA, to say to parents, the best gift you could give your child is to make your home safe. I grew up in this safety, constant safety. And so I was never afraid to make a mistake around my parents. Like they would listen to me. They would discipline us if we did something wrong, but it was never in anger. And so I say that's the key. I've been healthy my entire life. And I believe that was coming from the nurture I got from home. My nervous system stayed regulated, which meant my immune system stayed regulated.
Yeah.
So I learned so much about that, which helped develop this program. But my daughter having Crohn's and having abuse that we didn't know about, once I started doing all the research and putting the program together, she has no more Crohn's, no more lung disorder.
Wow. Is there a component, like you mentioned, you've worked with some of the Boston Marathon bombing survivors, and other people were there in that same situation, and the event didn't affect them as deeply as others. And I'm wondering if it is because of that component of maybe early childhood years of safety. I think that they wrote about that in The Body Keeps the Score a bit around, trauma or events don't impact people the same. Some of it is how much reserve, how regulated is your nervous system, your immune system, possibly from early childhood. I'm wondering, have you found that to be the case?
100%. So depending on their ACEs score, they also can have the PACEs score, which is the positive and compensatory, right, experiences. So if you maybe had some bumps when you were a child, but you had, like me, I had far more positive experiences, right, that would mitigate it. So that was really what the difference was. And I didn't really have any ACEs. So I had little bumps, but I had so much positive that if something did go wrong, I could recover very quickly. Where my wife had, like she said to me one time, this is before I was even doing the program, she looked at my report cards from school and she goes, wow, school was so easy for you. Well, you were lucky. And I said, well, of course it was easy for me. I didn't have anything bothering me. I could go to school and focus and concentrate. She had nowhere to rest. So outside wasn't safe and her home wasn't safe. I said, you are in constant flight. That has to
Yeah.
be exhausting. She's brilliant. She's my best researcher now because once
Yeah.
we got the trauma out of the way, she could then rest. And now the neuroplasticity starts to expand because now she's not in a fight or flight state. And that
Right.
gene that regulates, the neuroplasticity then starts to regulate again.
Wow. It is that component of allowing people to calm that inflammation or that fight or flight stress response, gets them out of the limbic and the amygdala, that stressed brain, and allows them to access their greatness of coming into the frontal lobe and executive functioning and actually kind of communication with source is the way that I look at that. It is such a gift to be able to do that for folks. I want to kind of pivot a little bit on from that component and talk about addiction and addiction treatment and what you've seen of not labeling. I think the question is addiction a disease? And, we've had books out there like Dopamine Nation and, social engineering of social media and the computers and gamification, et cetera, to keep our eyeballs glued. What are you seeing? Like, is this working in the addictions realm as well?
Yeah, we have a lot of experience in that. In fact, one of the ladies that they interviewed for the Today Show, she talked about she was 17 years in addiction when she came to see me 6 years ago,
Mm.
and she's been sober ever since. And what I said to her when she first came in, her name's Michelle. You should just see what she's doing now. I mean, she's 17 years in addiction. Courts took away her daughter. She was really struggling. Her parents pretty much disowned her. Her family didn't want anything to do with her. And now she's got her daughter back. The courts awarded her daughter back. She's got two businesses. She's got her own home. She's gotten married. She's living an amazing life. And what I said to her when she first came in, I said, Michelle, there's nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with your mind. And so she was like, well, okay. And she goes, but I'm in addiction, right? And I
Yeah.
said, addiction is not a disease, it's a code. I
Mm.
said, you've had a lot of pain. She goes, and I said, you've had a lot of trauma. And she says, well, how do you know I've had a lot of trauma? I says, because you wouldn't be doing this if you didn't.
Yeah.
Addiction is the symptom of the problem. It's
Mm.
the pain and it's the trauma. You found a resource to stop the pain, and your subconscious mind operates in the present. So when does your subconscious want the pain to stop? Now. So
Mhm.
because it operates in the present and you take that drug or you take that drink and the pain stops, it solved the problem. And
Mm.
because it operates in the present, it can't see a consequence because it doesn't have a connection to time. So now the more you use it, the stronger the code gets. And then somebody comes along and says, well, Dr. Echo, he can't do that. That's bad for you. I'm going to take that away from you. Oh, no, you're not.
Yeah.
I don't have no other way to stop this pain. So we've got to stop shaming and guilting these people and understanding that it's coming from pain. And the book, like the Dopamine Nation, basically what they're saying is, well, they're trying to get high. They want to get a dopamine hit. And so the way I explain it is if you and I were standing together and I started shaking your hand and I started squeezing so hard, you got into so much pain. And I just said, if you take a drink of this, I'll let go. And so you'll do anything to get out of that pain. So you take the drink. Now you do get a dopamine hit because you feel better. But is that
Right.
why you took the drink?
Right.
You,
Right.
you
At
took
least
it to
get
stop the
out of
pain.
pain. Yeah.
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 And that's what they're doing. So one lady had said to me, she came in and she says, I told my therapist she'd been in heroin for 7 years. And she says, I told my therapist I was coming in to see you. And he told me, be honest and upfront and let you know I have self-destructive behavior. And so I smiled. I said, really? What would make you think you're self-destructive? And she
Yeah.
looks at me and she goes, well, I'm sticking a needle in my arm with heroin. You don't think that's self-destructive? I said, no, I think
Mm.
you're trying to feel better. And I'll bet you when you stuck the needle in your arm, you felt better. She goes,
Right.
yeah. I says,
Yeah.
the substance is destructive. You're not destructive. You were trying to stop your pain. You saw the shift in her face. It was like
Wow.
nobody had said that to her before, right?
Yeah.
Because they had shamed her and guilted her and told her she's broken and defeated and she's going to have to white knuckle this for the rest of her life. And I said, no, you're not. I mean, Michelle's been 6 years. And she said, I'm fine. I don't have any cravings, right? She's doing okay. One guy said to me, he said, the best way I can describe it, he says, I was in rehab multiple times. When I'd get out of rehab, I couldn't stop thinking about wanting to use again. He says, I got out of your program. I don't think about it anymore.
Wow. Yeah, that is so phenomenal. Well, so that leads then into the Inspire Performance Institute. So, this component of rebooting the mind, how does this help performance? Which is a little bit of a redundant statement at this point in our interview, but really break world records simply by changing mindsets, I guess would be the punchline here, Don.
It is, and that's what we're seeing. I've got evidence of this as well. It actually, trauma affects the mitochondria, the energy in the cell. And so when the trauma is running, it's pulling energy. So it's an energy drain on the system. So when we resolve the trauma, so I've got a number of examples. Marco Cicchetto was a double amputee, had lost both his legs to suicide attempt from his cousin committed suicide and then he attempted suicide. So he lost his legs from frostbite and then they built him, he was a marathon runner from Kenya. So they rebuilt prosthetics and then built him blades to run on again.
Hmm.
But he had plateaued. He wasn't improving no matter how much training they were giving him. So they asked if I would take him through the program. And so 9 days after going through the program, he runs in a marathon and takes 15 seconds per mile off his time.
Wow.
9 days after. And then another month later, he runs in the Boston Marathon and broke the world record. He's
Huh.
still now currently the world record holder for marathoners with amputations. And then a couple months later, broke his own world record in the Chicago Marathon and got signed by Nike.
Wow. Phenomenal.
So that's one of the things that I do talk about. And there's an institute like Nona Performance Institute that work with world-class athletes. And when I shared that with them about the mitochondria, the one guy said to me, he says, you just blew my mind. He said, we never understood why these world-class athletes, these are the prime physical conditioned people in the world in their field. We never understood why they go into a sympathetic nervous system response when they were at rest. And he says, you're telling me it's a trauma loop. I said, yeah, they didn't know that. So if
Wow.
that trauma is running, they're not aware of it. They're high functioning athletes, world-class athletes. It's still pulling energy from their system. And when you resolve the trauma, the energy, and what I said to Marco, I said, Marco, I didn't make you faster. You were always that fast. It's almost like you just freed up some fuel.
Yeah, freedom up. That is phenomenal. Dr. Wood, thank you so much for coming on and sharing the TIPP program and the stories of resilience and folks kind of going for it, getting their lives back. We're definitely going to have you on. I can think of multiple studies that I want to run here with our folks with Parkinson's and really been looking for this trauma piece. And I think you really have uncovered the gold. So thank you so much.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to work together. Sounds great.
Awesome. Well, I thank everybody for tuning in. This one can save a life. Please share it with loved ones. Let's get the word out. It's coming from us, from our hearts to you. We wouldn't be doing this without you. Give us a 5-star review. Write up what you're going to take out of this episode. We'd love to get into that communication. We're going to have Dr. Don's, all of his how to contact him around the show and in the show notes. Dr. Wood, I look forward to many more.
Dr. Eckel, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
If you're finding this conversation insightful, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's a simple way to stay connected and get more strategies for optimizing brain function and longevity. Plus, it helps us bring you even more cutting-edge content. Thank you for being here. Now, let's get back to exploring the future of brain health. Thanks for joining us this week on the Brain Regen Lab podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to visit brainregen.com, where you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's conversation, we'd love for you to leave a review. It helps others discover the show. You can also share this episode with a friend or loved one who's passionate about brain health. Want to dive deeper? Check out our latest resources at brainregen.com/podcast. Be sure to tune in next week as we continue unlocking the secrets to a sharper mind and a longer, healthier life. Stay sharp, stay curious, and keep thriving.